Chapter 7. There are the things I can't say when we're alone. When he woke up, he was confused. The other side of the bed was empty. Had Remus gotten up to make breakfast already? Shit. Sirius really intended to do it himself this time. But then again, he hadn't exactly set an alarm to... Oh. He let out a breath. He wasn't at Remus's flat. He was at James and Lily's. And he pretended to himself that he wasn't slightly disappointed at that realization. He loved James. He loved Lily. He loved Crookshanks, who, he quickly realized, had somehow broken into his room and was now curled up behind the curve of his knee. But they wouldn't kiss him good morning. Well, James, maybe. Of course, Remus couldn't kiss him, either. But at least he would look at Sirius like he wanted to kiss him. Often, that felt like it was enough to hold him. Thinking of Remus led to a flutter in Sirius's chest, as he suddenly remembered that now he could text Remus. That was an unexpected, pleasant surprise. When he unlocked his phone to find it still on the Instagram of one Peter Pettigrew, a different sort of flutter moved into his chest. Last night, Sirius had gone through almost the entirety of the portfolio of this Pettigrew, finding every single one of Mooney's forearm tattoos and his throat tattoo. And before Sirius could convince himself to put the phone down, he'd found several more that he felt pretty sure were on Mooney's skin, based on tone and placement. There was a thin, wiry wolf on the left side of Mooney's ribs, or it looked like it could be Mooney's ribs. A portrait of a woman with pinned-up hair superimposed over an iris on his chest, and the one that almost killed Sirius because there was so much usually hidden skin bared for the photo, what looked like a rosary beads curled around the prominent bone of his right hip, a cross hanging over the top of his thigh. For fuck's sake, it had to be Remus, right? Still, Sirius kept trying to stuff down his instinctual reaction, his excitement that he was right, after all, because he could still be wrong. Surely, one person could buy art from a particular artist, and a totally different person could have that artist give them a tattoo. Just because Remus owned art that was created by the same person that tattooed Mooney didn't mean that Mooney and Remus were the same person. Sure, it was an extremely unlikely coincidence that they would both happen to have another friend in common other than Sirius, but it wasn't impossible. All right, yes, there was the physical distance to consider, the tattoo shop being rather far from where Mooney usually played shows, but Sirius had once gone all the way to Glasgow for a tattoo done by a particular artist. It wasn't unheard of. With a defiant shake of his head, he closed the app, trying to remind himself that if Mooney was Remus, then surely he would have told Sirius by now. If Mooney was Remus, being in Holyhead wouldn't even be the worst of his secrets. Sirius had been a party to the worst one, or, well, the worst ones, plural, as in attempting to break celibacy vows and actually breaking into the Black family house the other night. At the same moment that he opened the conversation with Remus from the night before, a new message came through. It was a picture. The sight of it sent an immediate, wide smile to Sirius's face, and a strangely fond sort of tugging feeling in the base of his chest. In one corner of the photo was Teddy, with his messy blue hair and his punk rock sneer, his arm outstretched as he was obviously the one holding the phone out to take the photo. Next to him was Harry in his new glasses, gold and round, just like Remus's pair, and he was clearly trying to match Teddy's rebellious expression, but he was really only succeeding in looking ferocious through his two very large head wounds. Between them, but slightly behind, was Remus, grinning from ear to ear and holding two fingers up behind both boys' heads. As Sirius looked closer, he could see what looked like flour in Remus's hair, on Teddy's forehead, little white, smudgy fingerprints on the lenses of Harry's new glasses. At the bottom of the picture was a caption that said, "Cranberry orange scones in the oven. We turned on the mixer a bit too fast, as you can see." In retaliation for being so cute and having so much damn fun without him, Sirius carefully leaned over and took a photo of Crookshanks in the sliver of sunlight coming in from Sirius's curtained window, lying quietly with her paws crossed over Sirius's ankle, and her fluffy face resting on top of them. He captioned the photo, "Eat your heart out," but then added, "Tell the boys to save a scone for me." God, it was going to be a long fucking day. All he wanted to do was race over to the church, steal a scone from Teddy, steal a hug from Harry, and steal a kiss from Remus. Was that so much to ask? Just before Sirius could convince himself to just go, what the hell did it even matter anyway? Teddy and Harry could technically be chaperones without knowing, couldn't they? Another text came in from Remus. "Your Holiness. Good thing you didn't stay last night. My granddad is coming in today." Sirius. Oh, Christ. Why now all of a sudden? "Your Holiness. Apparently, he spent the week in London. Some Catholic big shot get-together bullshit. Plus, he knew your dad's funeral was tomorrow, and he doesn't trust me not to fuck it up." Sirius. Why does he think you would fuck it up? And did he know my dad? "Your Holiness. He did know your dad, because your dad was also a Catholic big shot. And he thinks I would fuck it up, because I hate Catholic big shots, and he knows this." Sirius. I'm really interested in how he knows this. "Your Holiness. I may have, on more than one occasion, told a bishop, very politely, to fuck the fuck off." Sirius. The same bishop? 2 different bishops? "Your Holiness. 2 different ones." Sirius. And I was worried about you losing the church because of me. When you're over here telling the person who is ultimately your boss to fuck off on 2 separate occasions. Did I get that right? "Your Holiness. Okay, yeah, but, well, all right. I don't have a good excuse. I was practically trying to get fired then, except my granddad prevented it." Sirius. This was before you met Teddy, wasn't it? Before you began your underground gay agenda. "Your Holiness. Yes, thank you. I should name it that. I'll print it on business cards." Sirius. Speaking of which, did you send Harry and Teddy home? "Your Holiness. Yeah, quickly. I told Teddy to stay away until Monday. He's met my granddad once. It was an unpleasant experience for everyone." Sirius. He's going to make you redo the eulogy, isn't he? "Your Holiness. No, I'm giving him your copy of the eulogy. Your original copy. The shit version." Sirius. Thank you. All those years of honing my skills finally paid off. "Your Holiness. Come now, Mr. Editor-in-Chief. Surely the years of public print have given you thicker skin than that." Sirius. You still don't believe me, do you? "Your Holiness. Google is a thing, you know. I looked it up, immediately. So, of course I believe you, because of credible sources." Sirius. Well, now you know I'm loaded. Leave the church. Become a house husband. "Your Holiness. Did you just propose to me? Just so you can have sex with me?" Sirius. Not just for sex. For a shit ton of sex. Decades of sex. "Your Holiness. In that case, I accept. Let's elope. Starting now. You could beat my granddad here, if you leave 15 minutes ago." Sirius. I could still probably make it. I'm a terribly reckless driver. "Your Holiness. This fucks up our call later tonight. I don't anticipate I'll be feeling all that horny, with my homophobic granddad on the sofa." Sirius. Ew, you're letting him sleep on my sofa? "Your Holiness. He's sure as hell not sleeping in your bed." Sirius. Aw, my bed. "Your Holiness. Well, it still smells like you. God, I thought about you all fucking night. It was a long, hard night, Sirius. Fuck, now I'm thinking about it again. I should go rub one out in the shower while I still can. Sirius. Oh, you bitch. "Your Holiness. Feel free to do the same. I give you permission to picture me naked. Sirius: That's so generous. Thank you. Your Holiness: You're so welcome. Think of it as a distraction, since you'll be without me for a few days. I thought you might need a big one. Sirius: Was that a euphemism? Your Holiness: I feel like I should say no. Sirius screamed into his pillow. This was the same fucking conversation he'd had with Mooney, down to the letter, down to the lack of capitalization of the letters. It was Mooney. Remus had to be Mooney. If it turned out he wasn't, Sirius was going to lose his damn mind. Maybe he already had. More importantly, if Remus was Mooney, he clearly wanted Sirius to know, or at least have the suspicion. There was no other explanation for him to use the same exact phrasing to keep leaving blatant hints like these. Despite that, Sirius wanted Remus to be the one to tell him. He didn't want to play the game and win. He wanted to play the game and surrender. He wanted Remus to see him as the one who could carry all his secrets for him. He wanted Remus to see him as separate from the rest of the world. With heavy shoulders, Sirius dragged himself from his room and threw himself down, face first, onto the sofa next to James, the top of his head nudging the side of James's thigh. From somewhere within the house, he could hear the distinctive sound of Lily drumming her fingers on the edge of something, starting and stopping entirely at random as she did it without thinking, without realizing. Long night? James asked. Long and lonely, Sirius mumbled into the sofa cushion. And then he compounds my suffering by sending me an adorable picture this morning, and I don't know how I'm supposed to deal with it. But is it actually adorable? James asked. Sirius could hear the insinuation in his voice, the knowing smirk on his face. Or is it the kind of adorable that you can't show to other people? The innocent and pure kind of adorable, Sirius said, opening the message with one hand, the other buried somewhere underneath his torso from where he had violently flung himself onto the sofa. Oh my God, James said with a sigh that sounded a lot like the way Sirius had sighed at the same picture. A little bit adoring, a little bit longing, a little bit jealous, though James was probably more jealous over not having scones. Shit, I do owe you 10 quid. He's absolutely a smoke show. Before Sirius could correct him, he may have allowed a smile, a belligerent rise in his sharp brow. That was Mooney, not the same guy, remember? Sirius reminded him, though he was still very unsure of that himself. He changed his mind so often, he didn't know which way was up anymore. How sure are you about that? James asked, moving Sirius's mobile screen closer to his face and squinting harder at the photo. His build is the same. His skin tone looks the same. Mooney always wears those Hollywood sunglasses, but sometimes he raises his eyebrow, mostly when he's looking at you, by the way. Just commenting on that. And I swear there's a scar there, and it looks just like this one, James said, pointing to that characteristic scar that sliced Remus's brow in two, that Sirius had thought looked like a piercing job gone wrong the first time he'd met Remus. Plus, I'm pretty sure that clerical collar is tall enough to hide the tattoo on his throat. And you said he always wears those long sleeves, so he could... James! Sirius interrupted with a frustrated growl, angrily pressing his face further into the sofa as he locked his phone, fumbling around to set it onto the coffee table. Please stop indulging this fantasy, because the more I think that Remus might be Mooney, the more attracted I find myself becoming to Mooney, who I was very fucking attracted to in the first place. But if he isn't Mooney, I'm going to end up disappointed, no matter what, because I'm so fucking... He stopped short, letting out a hard breath. Serious, James said, a careful measure in his voice, the same one that was there when he was trying to build up a difficult subject. But he said something unexpected. Are you still talking to Mooney? No, I stopped texting him a couple nights ago, Sirius said, turning his face so that his words weren't being spoken into the cushion fibers. Because Marlene told me his name was John. So you stopped talking to him because you found out his name isn't Remus? Yeah. Let me see if I've got this right. You were texting a hot bass player who was covered in tattoos, who was obviously into you, who you admit to being very fucking attracted to, and you stopped texting him to spend more time with a priest? With a knowing glare, Sirius looked up at James, who was already looking back at Sirius with his eyebrows high in his face, his lips pressed into a thin line. I see what you're doing, but you're missing many key details. Like what? The priest is equally as hot. Uh-huh. And I couldn't date the bass player either, Sirius argued. Of course. Plus, I have never seen the bass player's face. Sirius, James said, rolling his eyes. What are you trying to get me to admit, James? Sirius said with a loud sigh, which was more like a hot, angry growl moving out of his partly clenched teeth. With a restless flop, Sirius rolled over on the sofa, resting his head on James's thigh, and James wordlessly moved his fingers into Sirius's hair, softly dragging his nails down Sirius's scalp in some effort to relieve his stress and get him to speak. You heard me say it last night. Sirius swallowed, looking pathetically up at James. I can't live without him. You poor, desperate thing, James said with an annoying click of his tongue, pressing his palm flat to Sirius's forehead to push all the hair out of his face. You know who you sound like? Sirius blinked up at him, and James's hand still on his face. Don't say it. You sound like me, James said anyway, rather emphatically, moving his hand so that he could lean down into Sirius's face to stare at him in accusation. When I realized I was falling in love with Lily. I'm not in love with him, Sirius grumbled, rolling his eyes. Yet, he added, begrudgingly, under his breath, before continuing to dig his own grave. Besides, I know I'm not as bad as you used to be. Yet, James repeated with a sarcastic rise in his eyebrow and an arrogant grin on his face. And you can't pretend like it wasn't entertaining for you, letting me drag you to every Fidelia's show, watching me awkwardly flirt with the hot drummer, listening to me complain when I couldn't get up the nerve. Against his will, Sirius smiled. All right, I'll admit, that was entertaining. For a while, there was silence, and James resumed running his fingers through Sirius's hair. Sirius nearly fell asleep. Until James said, Can you keep it a secret? In his drowsy oblivion, Sirius lost the conversation. Can I keep what a secret? Can you keep Remus a secret? He clarified softly. Can you both keep each other a secret? Are you asking if we're capable of having an affair? Sirius said with a growing smile. I'm just asking, James said with an innocent shrug and a less than innocent smile. I'd have to ask Remus if he'd feel guilty cheating on the church. Sirius laughed, but it tapered off quickly as he thought of that text conversation they'd had earlier. He seemed keen to the idea last night, but his homophobic granddad is in town now, so I doubt we'll have that conversation anytime soon. What conversation? Lily asked as she swept into the room, cherry red hair tied into a messy top knot at the crown of her head, one of James's old t-shirts with a stretched out collar hanging off of one of her freckled shoulders. In one fluid motion, she crossed her ankles and sat down on the floor across from them at the coffee table, sitting with her feet tucked underneath her. I'm trying to convince Sirius to have an affair with the priest, James said casually. Weren't you trying to convince him not to just last night? She asked. That was before he showed me this, James said, with a dramatic pause as he unlocked Sirius's phone and showed Lily the picture that Remus had sent Sirius earlier that morning. Lily moved closer to James to inspect the photo, glancing at Sirius with a curious smirk as soon as she saw Remus. Damn, okay, Lily said with a gleam in her eye, turning down the corners of her mouth and raising both her eyebrows in some strange expression that somehow conveyed her approval. So now, just because you realize he's hot, it's acceptable to fornicate with him? Sirius huffed, heavily rolling his eyes. But James wasn't paying attention. He was looking at the photo. When I was arguing with you yesterday, James said as he and Lily analyzed this picture of Remus and the boys. I'm going to be honest, I wasn't sure what his intentions were. His intentions? Sirius scoffed. He's a fucking priest. Listen, you know him better than I do, James reasoned under a short breath, the kind he took when he was afraid of putting his foot in his mouth. I was just worried you were going to dive headfirst into this, like you always do, and he would get what he wanted and then toss you aside. With a softened expression, Sirius raised his arm to hold James by the knee, from where Sirius was still lounged with his neck across James's thigh. James just smiled. I didn't want to watch him break your heart. There was an ache in Sirius's chest as he realized that James had to watch that happen more than once. And how does this photo change that exactly? Lily sensibly asked. The kids, James confirmed without a shred of hesitancy in his voice. The one with the glasses is so cute, I could die, Lily said with a dramatic but enthusiastic squeal that carried into her next thought. He's got little flower fingerprints on his glasses. Oh my God. That's Harry, Sirius said, craning his head over James's leg so he could look, upside down, at the photo with him. At the sight of Harry's smiling face, covered in a fine layer of flour, the smile on Sirius's face was instantaneous. Until yesterday, he lived with his aunt and uncle, who make him sleep under the stairs, force him to go by his dead name, force him to wear girls' clothes, punish him for cutting his hair himself when they wouldn't let him keep it short, make him wear hand-me-down eyeglasses that were not only the wrong prescription, but too big for his face and cracked through one lens. Sirius listed the crimes against Harry's guardians, growing more and more angry at the situation until he realized that James and Lily were staring at him in absolute horror. Quickly, Sirius sat up, unsettling all of his finger-combed hair across his face. As he brushed the hair from his face, he assuaged their fears. It's fine. Remus has a friend in child services who helped us get emergency removal of Harry from the home. He's staying with Dora now. She's Teddy's mom. Sorry, Teddy is the one with the blue hair. Remus had to do the same thing for Teddy after his first foster family kicked him out. Apparently, Remus does this for all the kids in the area. Teddy is sort of his liaison, you know, finds all the kids in trouble and brings them to Remus for help. It's a whole operation. I'm talking... Sirius rattled off, trying to squeeze in a lot of information into a small time frame, abruptly coming to a halt as he realized, while he had been going on and listing all of Remus's accomplishments, James and Lily were still staring at him, full-on staring, open mouth, wide-eyed. With an awkward laugh, Sirius summed up, Sorry, I'm info-dumping. So, when you say he's a priest, Lily said, holding up a finger, her sharp eyebrows rose in Sirius's direction. He waited on held breath for her to finish. What you really mean is he's a damn saint. Sirius violently let out the oxygen in his lungs, immensely relieved. I can't argue with you. And that's what I saw in the picture, James said emphatically, almost excitedly. Well, not exactly, but those kids love him. They trust him. You can see it in the photo. Kids aren't usually wrong about people, especially younger kids like Harry. With a sigh of his own, as if relieved in knowing that his best friend's heart was going to be well cared for, James let himself fall back into the sofa cushions. You should have seen his face yesterday when he told Harry he was going to get him some new glasses, Sirius said with a sentimental grin, one that James wordlessly acknowledged. When Harry asked if he could get a pair that looked like Remus's frames, I think his heart might have actually melted. Lily was still holding Sirius's phone. His little face is so precious. You'd have to be heartless not to melt. Lily gushed as she zoomed in on Harry's face with a strangely fond smile in the corner of her full lips. With a maudlin expression, she looked up to add, His eyes somehow look exactly like yours, James. I thought the same thing, Sirius exclaimed, his hand shooting into the air. Silently, she shared a particularly charged glance with James, an unspoken conversation occurring between the two of them that Sirius didn't feel the need to mention. He was pretty sure he knew the content. Wait, isn't this the guy you think is Mooney? From Hollyhead? Lily asked, the change in topic so swift that Sirius felt dizzy in trying to keep up with it. With a perplexed wince, he tilted his head. Maybe? He said in a sharp, high-pitched, quizzical tone. I thought you said it wasn't him, James interjected, his tone somewhere between betrayed, because Sirius hadn't told him yet, and confused, because Sirius hadn't told him yet. Okay, so I thought it wasn't him, but... He paused, trying to figure out the best way to explain this, because he knew it sounded super fucking crazy. He keeps saying things that are exactly the same things Mooney texted to me, like word for word, and I'm about to get very conspiratorial on you. Stay with me. This one is a little far-fetched. He's got an art on his walls signed by Peter Pettigrew, who I found on Instagram, and he's definitely the same guy who does Mooney's tattoos. Hang on, I know Pete, Lily practically screamed, getting drawn into Sirius's scheme. That mermaid tattoo that Marlene has on her calf? I went with her when she got it, and Pete is the guy who did it. Her expression became more sinister as she looked carefully at Sirius. Now, I'm not saying we should go to Pete's shop to get more information. She trailed off, and James immediately picked it up. Sirius has been wanting a new tattoo, he added, feigning innocence. And if we were to casually mention his past work that we saw on his Insta, Lily hummed, casting prompting glances in Sirius's direction. At first, his expression was intrigued, but it fell hopeless. Come on, Marlene might not have even told me his real name. You think his tattoo guy is going to tell us? He said, with a sigh of exasperation. But James and Lily were not so easily deterred. Lily clicked her tongue. We still don't know that Marlene didn't just lie to protect him. The worst outcome is you still get a wicked tattoo, James encouraged with a shrug. His work is the best, after all, Lily prodded, before adding the most tempting point. Plus, we can catch a Hollyhead show on the way back. She flashed her enticing eyebrows. Sirius's rose, too. They're playing tonight? He asked, trying to keep his voice level. Lily's smile grew. 2 shows left before they go on hiatus, she confirmed. Might be your last chance. Sirius wrinkled his nose, glancing between them both. What the fuck are we waiting for? The buzz of the tattoo gun sent an immediate, low-level anxiety into Sirius's chest, as it did every time he walked into a tattoo shop. The pain wasn't all that bad, but anticipation of the pain was awful. I was hoping to get something done by Wormtail today. Is he in? Sirius asked the bloke standing behind the case of body jewelry and tattoo aftercare. With a nod, he moved out from the counter. He's finishing up a piece. I'll let him know you're waiting on him, the guy replied. Thank you, Sirius said, taking a breath. He turned to James and Lily and said with a laugh that stuck in his throat, I think I'm more nervous about meeting this guy than I am about the tattoo. What are you getting? Lily asked with an expression that indicated she'd forgotten to ask. But they'd spent most of the car ride over talking about Remus, the church, Teddy, Harry, all of it. Sirius wished he could have been texting Remus the whole way there, since James was driving and all, but because Remus's grandfather was in town, texts from Remus had been minimal at best. It's kind of my final fuck you to my dad, Sirius said with a sly grin. You'll see. As they settled onto a sofa in the waiting area, James pulled a thick book into his lap that said Wormtail across the front. This one is Mooney's, isn't it? James asked, flipping through Wormtail's extensive portfolio before landing on one page in particular, pointing to the tattoo that Sirius had seen at the last Hollyhead show, prayer hands engulfed in fire above the words, Everything is fine. Sirius nodded, smiling. The next one, too, he said, indicating the next page that held a picture of Mooney's inner forearm, where the line to an old hymn was scripted across the skin. As James turned the pages, tattoos of other folks in between, Sirius caught another one. And I think maybe that one. It was the slightly scandalous picture of the inside of Mooney's bare hip, or what looked like Mooney's hip, with the rosary beads that threaded down over his thigh. Unlike the photo on Instagram that had been cropped to only show the work, this photo was a little less doctored, and in the edge of the photo, you could see where Mooney was holding the unfastened waist of his dark jeans open to bare his skin. It unraveled Sirius. "This one?" James said, pointing to Mooney's naked hip, eyebrows incriminatingly high. "I said I think." Sirius rolled his eyes. "Same skin tone, you know? Just guessing." "Uh-huh," James replied, winking dramatically. Sirius made his eyes roll harder. About that time, a door to one of the back rooms opened up, and a man with a dark bandage covering most of his shoulder walked out of the room. Following him was the most heavily tattooed person Sirius had ever seen in his life, including Mooney. Tattoos on his throat up to his ears, tattoos on both hands and all 10 fingers, a delicate vine of flowers along his hairline. His wild hair was so blonde, it was white, or maybe it was dyed that way. But for someone so intimidating looking, he had the widest, most genuine smile in the whole place. When he caught sight of James thumbing through his portfolio, he hurried over. At first, when he scanned the three of them sitting on the sofa, it seemed like his gaze paused on Sirius, but in the next instant his expression was blanked out, replaced by a tameless grin. "Hiya, gents. And lady," he said in a bright tone, his smile widening further, though Sirius hadn't thought it would be possible. "Who's looking for me to torture them this fine afternoon?" "That would be me." Sirius stood, raising his hand. Wormtail immediately gave him a sharp high five. Sirius tried to shoot a confused glance at James, but he ended up looking over in sheer amusement. "Great. Sounds good. I'm Pete. It's good to meet you." He rattled off excitedly, and, with the same hand he'd just high-fived Sirius with, he shot it out to shake Sirius's hand. In his surprise, Sirius glanced down, charmed to find a small cartoon mouse on the inside of his wrist, smiling with the same organic, unassuming grin as its host. With a smile to match, Sirius instinctively reached out to shake this man's hand, fascinated by the way he then reached out a second hand to hold Sirius's hand more firmly. It was almost like an embrace, warm and comforting and soothing in ways that Sirius couldn't try to explain. "What's the plan? Am I going to need to sketch it out first?" he asked, taking Sirius by the shoulder and guiding him into the studio, of sorts, where Sirius saw a lot of the same artwork he'd seen in Remus's bedroom displayed on the walls. From behind them, Pete waved James and Lily to follow. "I have a general sketch already. I don't know. You may need to clean it up a bit or redo the whole thing, whatever you think, but I need the lettering to be in this specific handwriting," he said, feeling strangely nervous as he handed over the previously folded paper to Wormtail. Pete, rather, while James and Lily followed into the room and immediately began to admire the art on the walls. "Whose handwriting?" Pete asked, his manic personality stilling with curiosity. "Mine," Sirius answered quickly, feeling like it was a quiz question that he was at risk of answering incorrectly. After giving the crude drawing a moment of stern consideration, the effervescent smile snapped back over Pete's face with zero transition of expression in between the two. "Love it. Did you come up with it yourself? Very original," Pete said, not waiting for the answer before replying to it and moving on completely. As his gaze went back to the drawing, his blonde eyebrows furrowed a bit, studying it. "I can sketch it again, if you'd like, clean it up a bit, like you said, but I really think the unsteadiness of the lines, no offense, really give it the authentic, unpolished look I think you're probably going for here. I think all I'd like to do is adjust the joints, separate them a bit further so the whole thing looks even more unstable, like it's being held together by a prayer. Know what I mean?" Yeah, exactly," Sirius said, in a shade of disbelief at how Pete knew precisely the vibe Sirius wanted in this piece. Lily glanced over Pete's shoulder as he took one last look at the paper in his hands. James didn't bother looking. He'd seen it a dozen times. On the paper was an amateurish drawing of a skeleton hand giving the middle finger, a ribbon intertwined between the fingers and the joints that read, "Free from the wicked torment of sin. Free from the last fuck I'm handing in." with rosary beads wrapped around the bones, a skull hanging at the bony wrist where a cross was usually meant to be. "Excellent," Pete said with a grin wider than his face. "Where did you want it?" "Here," Sirius said, slapping his fingers onto the blank skin on his left inner forearm. And by the solemn expression on Pete's face, it looked like he was measuring the parameters in his head. "Perfect," he finally said, that grin returning, his cheeks stretching out beyond an otherwise perfectly squared jaw, the white stubble on his face so translucent it produced an ethereal glow around his whole face. Or maybe that was just his radiant smile. "I'm thinking black and white, but maybe give the rosary a little reddish pink sort of color, make them look aged to match the bones. Thoughts?" "Great," Sirius agreed, sort of astounded at how easily Pete caught on to what Sirius wanted in this tattoo. "What do you think about adding this to the bone?" Sirius asked, flashing the little red heart on the bottom knuckle of his middle finger, the one against which Remus so often liked to press his lips. There was something in Pete's face as he looked at Sirius. It was a little like the incriminating expression that James had just given him about identifying Mooney's naked hip. Something unsaid, but something that didn't need to be said. Just how much did this Peter Pettigrew know about Mooney, or about Remus, or, hell, for that matter, about Sirius himself? How did he know about Sirius at all? "I couldn't love this tattoo idea anymore if I'd drawn it myself. And that's saying a lot because I've drawn a fuck ton of tattoos, my friend," he said, the smile returning, but leaving in place something unsaid that remained in his ocean blue eyes. "Sorry, I don't think I've asked your name. How rude." "It's Sirius," he replied with a confident smile. Usually, when he gave his first name, most people responded in the same way, a mixture of surprise and fascination. Not a lot of people in the world named Sirius. Pete, however, did not respond that way. He responded as if he already knew. "Sirius," he repeated before adding, literal tongue-in-cheek, looking absolutely pleased with himself. "That's cute." Immediately, Sirius narrowed his eyes in Pete's direction. Of course, there was a chance that this was pure coincidence, but Mooney had said the exact same thing upon learning Sirius's first name. Before Sirius could address it, Pete moved on, indicating the tattoo Sirius had gotten for Regulus on his opposite forearm. "You've got the perfect skin tone for tattoos. I mean, the color of this one is just incredible." With a glance up at Sirius, he motioned for permission to take Sirius's arm, and Sirius nodded, holding his arm out for Pete to hold. "The green on your translucent skin, against the underlying blue of your veins." He threw his head back, as if overtaken by emotion. "Remarkable." Sirius attempted to stifle a blush, but knowing his translucent skin, the pink in his cheeks was likely obvious to everyone, including Pete. "Yeah, thank you?" It came out more like a question. "Sirius," he said, nodding and grinning. And Sirius wasn't sure if he was meant to respond, but before he could, Pete looked over to James, leading with an, "And..." After blinking dumbly for several long, awkward seconds, Lily elbowed James hard enough that he realized he was meant to speak. "Oh, James," he shouted, waving his hands for no real reason. "I'm James." "And I'm Lily," Lily said in a manner that was much more smooth than James. "Sirius and James and Lily, I'm so glad you're here. I can already tell I'm going to love doing this tattoo. Thank you for letting me decorate your skin," he said in that fast-paced, run-on sentence sort of way. "Shouldn't take me but a few minutes. I'll tidy it up. Metaphorically, of course. Slap it onto some transfer paper, and we'll be ready to go. Settle in. I'll be back before you have time to miss me." As soon as Pete left, Sirius turned to James and Lily to say, "Now I know why Mooney is covered in tattoos. I would let that man tattoo literally anything onto me just to hang out with him." "Right?" James replied emphatically. "He is absolutely precious and deserves to be cherished." Lily just let out a sigh. "You are both so fucking weird." Simultaneously, James and Sirius looked over at her, blinking deliberately until she admitted, "Did you see the little mouse tattoo he had on his wrist?" She said, her voice and her smile turning a bit mushy. "That's the cutest shit I've ever seen." "I don't even want to interrogate him about Mooney anymore. I just want him to be friends with me. Sirius laughed, settling into the tattoo chair. You think he's going to show tonight? We're gonna find out, James said. Maybe we can convince him to come with us. I'm not complaining about your methods of forcing people to be friends with you, Lily started. I mean, that is how we collected you, James shrugged. Sirius added, Don't mess with perfection, am I right? He and James high-fived. But you have to admit it doesn't work on everyone, she said through clenched teeth. Not everyone likes being coerced into friendship. Remember that kid I used to be friends with when we met? That guy was a grade A dick, Lily, Sirius reminded her, settling back and draping his wrist across the arm of the chair, where Pete was about to drill ink into his skin. He just wanted to bone you. So did he, Lily grumbled, nodding to James. I take great offense to that, James argued sharply. I wanted you to fall in love with me first, and then I wanted to bone you, which is totally different. Before she could push him away, James swept in and held Lily tenderly by the face, smothering her face in kisses until she relented and kissed him back. Anyway, we absolutely never even attempted to befriend Snivelus, Sirius said, that name leaving a retch in his throat. He always brought his goth posse with him. They all had terrible hygiene. Not to mention, James remarked, wrapping his arm around Lily so she had no choice but to let him place delicate kisses all over her face. Not that she was complaining in the slightest. He's the one who kept going on and on about how you weren't really that good of a drummer, which is such bullshit. I remember, Lily said, immediately looking pissed, enough that James preemptively loosened his grip on her, but she pulled him close again. I should have believed you when you told me the first time. First of all, you're a beast. Nobody can do what you can do on the drums, Sirius reminded her. Thank you, she preened, turning her head just enough for James to sneak a kiss to her neck. Second of all, that's what an astronomical prick he was. Because he said shit like that about you to his friends so loud and so often that you were bound to overhear it eventually. Sirius rolled his eyes. All right, enough about him, Lily growled, sticking her tongue out. Sorry I brought him up. Just proves we're good judges of character, James hummed, lips still to her skin. I should have reminded James of that yesterday, Sirius sighed, narrowing his eyes in James's direction, and James responded with an apologetic wince. Because Remus is a model human being. And now I know better than to disagree with you, James said, which is why I am now almost 100% sure that your favorite priest moonlights as a punk rock bass player. Lily looked conflicted. I'm still not sure he's really Moony. Before Sirius could launch in with a counter-argument, before James could provide the overwhelming evidence, Pete came back into the room. At first, there was something that looked like surprise on Pete's face, or, at the very least, recognition, but Sirius noticed he was quick to mask it with that overwhelming, consuming smile. Who's Moony? He asked, as if to be polite, but Sirius saw something shrewd in his gaze. Friend of mine, Sirius said, trying to keep his voice casual. Actually, I think you do his tattoos. Is that right? Pete asked, wiping Sirius's forearm down with antibacterial cleanser before applying the transfer, peeling it off to display a purple outline. Take a look, see how you like it. For a moment, Sirius stood, turning his arm as he admired the work in the full-length mirror on the wall. It's brilliant, Sirius said, sincerely impressed. Pete had done just as he said, kept Sirius's messy lines, but disjointed the bones a little to make the whole thing look more unsettled, more feral. All right, let's do this, Pete shouted, that grin returning, but not the conversation. As Sirius sat back in the chair, arms stretched out onto the padded rest, Pete turned to the counter to ready his inks. But Sirius wasn't done with their talk yet. Yeah, I call him Moony, but that's not really his name. I don't know his name, actually. He's the one in your portfolio with the ram skull. You know him? He phrased the question specifically, leading Pete in, a valiant attempt to see if Pete knew his name. No gods, no masters, Pete said with a smile that looked guarded but honest. I know him. It was a distinctly short response, void of any details. Despite how Pete had been so verbose through their exchange so far, it seemed unnatural for him to suddenly stop the conversation there, unrelenting. "We're going to watch Holyhead play after this." James tried to redirect the conversation in an apparent effort to dissipate some of the heat that Sirius had been applying. "Are you going?" His initial blatant reaction was confusion. "You're going to the show tonight?" He seemed to direct the question to Sirius, but his gaze shifted to James, as if intentional, to keep it from appearing as if his attention was purposefully on Sirius. The smile returned, this one a bit more wary. "I've got an appointment after you. I might be able to slip away to catch the last few minutes," he said, pressing on the foot pedal that controlled the function of the tattoo gun, the distinct buzz sending a familiar jolt down Sirius's spine. He relaxed his arm. He took in a breath, and Pete's smile seemed to relax too. "You know, now that I look around," Sirius swerved the conversation back as the single needle for the outline dug into his skin. He winced slightly. "Another guy I know has some of your art too." "Small world," Pete said, his voice a little flat, his smile back to looking a bit more forced. "Father Lupin, at St. McGonagall's church." At first, Pete was unusually quiet. "I've given him a few pieces over the years," Pete finally confirmed, saying nothing more, seeming to be concentrating on the task at hand, the stark outline of the skeletal fingers on Sirius's skin. "I don't think I've ever met anyone more selfless than he is," Sirius said, not intending to gush about Remus to someone who may or may not be his acquaintance, but unable to help himself. Instantly, Pete's bright blue gaze shot up to watch Sirius carefully. "Yeah?" he asked, and it was more of a prompt to continue than anything else. And since Sirius was so fucking infatuated with Remus Lupin, he couldn't help but give an entire oration about this man and all his charm and wonder. "Without a doubt," Sirius said, using all the air in his lungs. "It's in everything he does. It's in the way he speaks, and in the way he listens, and in the way he looks at you. He has more of a right to doubt than anyone, but he somehow maintains this unbreakable faith that makes me want to believe in shit I've hated for most of my life. Mostly myself," Sirius said with a shaky laugh, taking in a breath to cover up the fact that he was getting overwhelmed just thinking about Remus, just talking about him to someone else. "From what I know," Pete said quietly, keeping his eye on his line work, and Sirius noticed the delicate way Pete phrased his wording. "That sounds just like him." A smile moved over his face that was like none of the others that had preceded it. It wasn't bold and loud and wild like the one Sirius had grown used to over their short time together. It was a soft and fond and reverent, like Remus himself. "Kind of strange for me to talk about a Catholic priest so affectionately while simultaneously getting a very sacrilegious tattoo," Sirius said with a sharp laugh. To his surprise, Pete joined him. He paused, a look of concern crossing over his features before he continued. "I think, of all people, he'll find the most cynical humor in it." Another set of emotions moved over Pete's face before a wildly mischievous grin settled into place. "But what do I know?" He looked at Sirius like the two of them shared a secret, one that Sirius wasn't in on quite yet. Or, hell, maybe he already was. With a black bandage taped around his newly tattooed forearm, Sirius rushed into the pub where Holyhead was supposed to be playing, James and Lily close behind him. The tattoo had taken a little longer than they had planned for. He was terrible with estimating time for things like that, though Pete had done better on the tattoo than Sirius could have ever imagined, and he wasn't complaining. So Sirius was worried they may have already missed Holyhead, unsure of their place in the evening's lineup. Holyhead wasn't on stage, but their merch table was in the back of the pub, being manned by someone Sirius didn't know. It seemed like maybe they hadn't gone on yet. He hoped. Just in case, Sirius stayed out of the crowd, close to the wall, a straight eyeline of Holyhead's merch table. Fortunately, his fears were unfounded. After only one more song, the current band, that Sirius had never even heard the name of before that moment, thanked the crowd and moved their equipment from the stage. The very next person to move onto the stage was Mooney, bass in hand. He was still wearing those heart-shaped glasses that he'd worn the last time Sirius had seen him, over the same black surgical mask, but his knit cap in a different color, this one dark green. Unlike the last two shows, he wasn't wearing a plaid overshirt, just a black t-shirt that read, "Ask me about my Lord and Savior, John McVie," over faded black jeans with holes in both knees, displaying tattoos that Sirius had yet to see. In fact, there were more tattoos visible than Sirius had ever gotten the chance to see, the ones on his upper arms typically hidden underneath colored plaid. In the minimal time Sirius was allotted to look at those tattoos, unobstructed, he was able to pick out one of Mooney's biceps, the torso of a skeleton holding a wilted bouquet of dead flowers with the phrase, "I'm not sick, but I'm not well." And through the wide hole at the knee of his torn jeans, it looked like tea leaves in the bottom of an elaborately decorated teacup formed into the shape of a canine skull, the mouth open in a howl, fangs colossal and sharp. Forgetting about the pain in his arm, Sirius pushed through the crowd to get to the front, though he was met with quite a bit of resistance. He only made it about halfway in, not nearly close enough to reach out and touch Mooney, or, better yet, be touched by Mooney, before the angry grumbling of the people around him grew to be too much, and he had to give up before getting another black eye. As he turned, he found James and Lily some distance behind him, unable to push any further because of the commotion that Sirius had caused by pushing in so far in the first place. With a weary sigh, Sirius turned back to the stage just in time to watch Mooney raise his head to the crowd from where he was knelt on one knee, plugging the bass into the pedal board. At once, his fingers seemed to go still. On achingly empty lungs, Sirius kept his eyes steadfastly on Mooney's face, just in case Mooney's eyes were on him from behind those heart-shaped sunglasses. He didn't stand, not at first. Instead, he moved to both knees, leaning back onto his heels to free his hands. He reached into his back pocket. "Mooney. Hi." Sirius stuffed his automatic smile down. When he looked back up, Mooney held his hand up in a motionless wave, and it fell one finger at a time until he held a loosely clenched fist absently into the air, as if he could barely convince himself to move. Sirius could hardly look away to respond to the text. Pedfoot. "Hi." While Sirius couldn't see the expression on Mooney's face, he could certainly see the way his lungs inflated deeply with too much air, the anxious way he pulled his hand across the back of his neck, craning his head from the tension on his tattooed skin as his arm pulled away. For the first time that Sirius was aware of, he noticed that, unlike Pete, who had tattoos up to his ears and down to his fingernails, Mooney had only about half of his throat tattooed. His hands and fingers kept suspiciously blank. Mooney didn't text him again. Starting with that deep breath he'd just taken, it was almost like Mooney was nervous, something Sirius had never witnessed. The way he played his bass was confident, arrogant. The way he sang was heavy and brash. The way he walked into a crowded room was rightful proud. This was more like watching Remus walk that stage. It was unassuming and quiet. Finally, the stage was set. Mooney had his bass in hand. Dorcas held her sticks crossed above her head, and just before Marlene leaned into the mic for her characteristic introduction, Mooney moved over to whisper something into her ear. She flashed Mooney a sympathetic smile and nodded fiercely. "Hi, how the fuck are ya? We're Hollyhead," she stated quickly, before slamming 3 quick chords in succession on her cherry red Stratocaster, repeating them and adding another 2 beats that Mooney and Dorcas succinctly joined in on, duplicating it once more before moving into the body of the song. And then Mooney moved to the mic, taking an audible breath in through his mask. "There was a time and place where I never thought I'd leave my own hometown, but those days finally are dead and gone. It was never my intention to stay there, oh no," he sang, sucking in short breaths in between the sharpened measures to keep up with the rapid pace of the driving song. They were the narrowed breaths of a lifelong smoker, a characteristic whine in the background of every pitch change and vocal trill. "There was a conscious effort played by me to disown anything I see. There was a boy I knew way back when who says he doesn't know me anymore." His distinct full voice sounded practically angry, growling in the way he sang the words. He doesn't know me anymore. And Sirius couldn't help but let it hit him squarely and painfully in the chest, along with the weight of his last conversation with Mooney. There are the lies, the things you never mention, Mooney sang, holding out the note in a trembling voice. These are my past mistakes I'll stay away from. It hit Sirius just as hard as the previous line, knowing he was leading Mooney, leading Remus, to making another one of those mistakes. Despite the heaviness of the lyrics, Sirius was still relieved to see the familiar roll in Mooney's shoulders as he sang, the alluring sway of his hips, the facilitating bend of his knees as he bounced with the beat, as he leaned in to sing underneath the microphone. These are my thoughts written down on paper. It's my only savior from not saying what I want to say. His naturally low voice stretched up to seize that high note, and, as soon as he did, he pulled a deep breath into his lungs, leaving a shrill, breath-starved gasp in the wake of the air moving in through his tightened throat. Sirius swallowed, incited. These are the thoughts that are on my mind, moments that haven't yet been defined, and I don't know if you could ever understand, he said, his voice growing high and sharp and urgent. These are the things I can't say when we're alone. His voice held out on its own before Marlene moved back in with those same opening chords. And for several long seconds during the break between the verses of Mooney's singing, Sirius let himself get lost in the glory of watching this man play bass. The frantic way he slid his fingers all the way down the neck of the bass and back up again in a flash. How he balanced on one foot just so that the other could beat against the floor with the beat of the kick drum. The precise way he used different fingers to pluck different strings in a rapid-fire method that he made look effortless. There were countless hours on the telephone. My ears were ringing from the dial tone. As he sang those words, Marlene held her guitar up to one of the amps to create a distinct feedback sound that mimicked the sound of an empty phone line for just an instant before she tore her fingers down all her strings at once to produce a cacophonous sound, leaping back seamlessly into the main melody. There were flashing lights, people staring. There was nothing I could ever do. Sirius visibly winced as that line reminded him of that night they broke into Walburga's house, back when Remus had been Roman, when a stranger had used the color of Remus's skin to make blatantly offensive assumptions about him. These are the lies, the things you never mention, he sang again, while Sirius began to wonder if he would ever know the truth, if he would ever see Remus's face above Mooney's tattoos. These are my past mistakes I'll stay away from. Maybe the whole thing was too much for Remus, keeping this secret, keeping Sirius a secret, keeping Teddy a secret. Maybe he had to keep them all separate to keep them all safe. Did Sirius really want to be one more worry piled onto Remus's already burdensome life? Especially in this regard, in finding out the one thing that Remus had managed to keep secret from nearly everyone. And the next lyric answered him. This is the truth, the only time you'll hear it. I'll write it down because it seems so hard to say it. The line repeated in his head, the only time you'll hear it. This was a secret that Remus didn't want to be known. Maybe he hadn't left clues for Sirius to put it all together himself. Maybe none of those things had been intentional at all. Maybe they were a slip of the tongue here, or a common turn of phrase there. Whatever it was, Sirius had finally come to a decision. If Remus didn't want to tell him, then he didn't need to know. He could wait to hear it from Remus's own mouth. Before Sirius could start considering the fact that he probably needed to distance himself from Remus in general, Mooney or not, because of all the undeserved pressure it added to his life, Mooney began to sing again, and Sirius stopped listening to himself and started listening to Mooney. These are my thoughts written down on paper. It's my only savior from not saying what I want to say. Just like the first chorus, when Mooney's voice grasped at that high note, it robbed all the breath from his lungs, and he devoured the oxygen to replace it, an aching whine left hanging in the hollowed air he left behind. These are the thoughts that are on my mind, moments that haven't yet been defined, and I don't know if you could ever understand. These are the things I can't say when we're alone." His already tired voice took on a mournful sort of howl as he held on to the last note over Marlene's closing chords. As the song concluded and the crowd cheered, there were so many emotions battling for the focus in Sirius's head, he couldn't even tell where one ended and the next began. His heart was pounding in the thrill of hearing Mooney sing, in the allure of watching him dance on stage, but his head was aching with the sobering understanding that Sirius was only adding to his list of secrets, to the lies that Remus was forced to tell. If Sirius knew the truth about Mooney, he was just one more person Remus had to keep track of in keeping that secret, in housing that lie. Sirius's presence in his life was bad enough. Did he want to make it worse by letting Remus know that Sirius was able to find out his most closely guarded secret relatively easily? Or did he want to prove that he could keep it by keeping it even from Remus? Before he could start wondering if he should reasonably even stay in Remus's life at all, because that was a fight he was always going to lose with himself, Holly had started into their next song. It was an original that Sirius hadn't heard before, but was immediately enthralled by, through the complicated rhythm that Dorcas kept on the drums, paired with the godlike level of difficulty of Mooney's bass line, set behind Marlene's tight vocals and raging guitar. It was just like watching them for the first time again. Sirius glanced back only a single time to try and find James and Lily, scanning the faces until he met James's distinctly hazel eyes behind his square frames. They'd been pushed back quite a bit by the eager crowd, and Sirius had only just begun to move back towards them in an effort to stay close together. But apparently, Sirius's propensity for getting easily distracted was obvious to those on stage. "Oi, Padfoot, pay attention!" Marlene breathed into the mic between the verse and the chorus, leaving Sirius to quickly jerk his head back towards the stage, his skin feeling more flushed than it had when he'd been watching Mooney dance just a moment ago. At the shock on Sirius's face at being called out by the lead singer, a laugh slipped into the lyrics of the chorus that Marlene was singing, and Sirius was pretty certain that if he could see Mooney's face, he would see a smile there. Hopefully Remus's smile. Still, even though he couldn't see Mooney's expression, he could practically feel the waves of mischief rolling over the bobbing crowd. In the next instant, Mooney had knelt at the very edge of the crowd, still hitting every note with perfection. Collectively, the crowd seemed to know how to respond, and it parted for him, making space for him to hang his lanky legs from the stage and hop down from it. In surprise and suspense, Sirius stood absolutely motionless. He forgot there was a song playing, almost forgot that Mooney was contributing to the song playing, except for the fervent motion of his fingers and the instrument underneath them. For more than a moment, Mooney stopped in front of him, serenading him with an impressive bass line, while Marlene sang lyrics that Sirius barely had the sense to hear, being so subdued by Mooney's presence before him. He thought he heard her sing the words, "I couldn't imagine it being anyone but you." And God, if he heard that right, how fucking fitting. At first, Mooney stood in front of him. It was clear that his attention was drawn to the bandage on Sirius's arm, despite that Sirius couldn't see the direction of his gaze through his dark glasses. When Sirius raised his arm, Mooney surprisingly nuzzled his masked face into Sirius's open palm, and it left Sirius feeling rather flushed at the familiar shape of his face, the familiar warmth of his bare skin, and the soft scratch of the dark stubble on his skin. As Sirius let his fingers dip down past Mooney's jaw, ghosting over his throat, Sirius realized he was habitually only touching the top half of his neck, avoiding the invisible clerical collar that was usually in his way. With a breath, he allowed his touch to move further, brushing over the moth tattooed over Mooney's prominent Adam's apple, catching on the collar of his shirt. At first, Mooney craned deeply into his touch, but he didn't stay in place for long. He circled Sirius like a hungry predator, without missing a single beat of the song. When he rounded Sirius's right side, he nestled up to Sirius's shoulder with his own and angled the headstock of his bass to stroke down the suddenly tightening line of Sirius's jaw, while still maintaining the rhythm of the song, never looking down at his hands, keeping his face turned toward Sirius, hidden by his favorite accessories. Then, he dipped the neck of his bass low and spun on his right heel until he was leaning against Sirius's back with his full weight. And Sirius reclined in response until they were holding each other upright. At once, they both leaned their heads back onto the other's shoulder, resting with their opposite ears pressed together and nuzzling their temples against one another's. Sirius reached back, fingers falling onto Mooney's throat. As Mooney's weight eased, Sirius did the same, until they were both on solid feet again, and Mooney used this regained freedom to move around to Sirius's left. With arms tensed, Mooney held his bass parallel to his body, moving it as far as he could get it while still holding a steady note, using the lull in the song to his advantage. And then, without warning, he buried his face into the curve of Sirius's neck, biting down through the mask onto the same place Remus had left a mark only the night before. He let out a breath, warm and wet against Sirius's skin, and Sirius let out the same breath into the smoky air above the partially dispersed crowd, his eyes fluttering closed as he reveled in the pressure of Mooney's mouth. From somewhere in the crowd, someone gave a shrill wolf whistle, reminding Sirius of where he was and the number of eyes currently watching their amorous display. For a moment, he was able to stifle a blush, that is, until Mooney let his face drag up the full length of Sirius's throat to the curve of his jaw, where he pressed a blatantly open kiss that Sirius was able to feel quite clearly, even through the multiple layers of the paper mask. Absently, Sirius found himself moving his fingers up to Mooney's hip, grabbing a handful of his ironic t-shirt and forming a fist within it, trembling and desperate. With Mooney closer than he'd ever been, for longer than he'd ever been, Sirius buried his face into what he hoped was a patch of gray buried in the temple of Mooney's dark hair, mostly concealed by the slouchy beanie he wore to hide it. And Sirius breathed him in to find floral notes, like strawberries in a back garden, a specific cedar-scented woodiness, like the bowels of an old building, and sweetness, like sugar and honey and vanilla in a recipe for the best French toast Sirius had ever had in his goddamn life. Just as the song ended with one last tug of Mooney's lowest bass string, Mooney balanced the body of his bass on the floor, one hand suddenly free. He used this new freedom to slip one finger under the bottom corner of his mask and push up, his face still hidden by the untamed coils of Sirius's hair. With a deliberate heavy breath that panted into the shell of Sirius's ear, he opened his mouth against Sirius's skin and kissed him just underneath his earlobe, the rest of his body pressing into Sirius as deeply as he could. "Fuck me," Sirius whined on empty lungs, head raising to the ceiling. "Fuck you," he then groaned bitterly, eliciting a soft, breathy laugh from Mooney's lips that was almost unmistakably Remus's laugh. As he pulled his mask back down, he went to pull away from Sirius, too. But Sirius caught him by the chin and dragged him back in, kissing him through the mask just to feel the shape of his lips one more time. This time, Mooney was the one to let out a rather indecent moan, right into Sirius's open, eager mouth. "All right, lover boy, get your ass back on stage already. The set's not over." Marlene laughed into the mic, and Mooney obediently leapt onto the stage as if it were nothing more than a step to his tall frame and lanky limbs, despite the fact that the same stage came to the waist of most people in the crowd. With the renewed energy of the crowd that surged forward, James and Lily were behind him again, and gratefully so, because Sirius wasn't sure his quivering legs would hold him up any longer. "If that's not Remus, I am in massive fucking trouble," Sirius said with a desperate laugh, gripping frantically onto James's shoulder for the support that his legs were suddenly not providing. "Well, what do you think?" Lily asked, hopefully. Sirius let out a shaking breath. "He smells just like Remus." He closed his eyes to draw on that scent again. "He bit down on the same mark he left last night. It's Remus," he confirmed, but backpedaled. "God, I want it to be Remus." "Is there any chance it's not?" James wondered as Sirius watched the man with the bass move a little more freely, a little more loosely around on the stage, like that nervous energy from the start of the show had been burned away, and all that was left was pleasure in how thoroughly he'd flustered Sirius. I'm afraid I'm projecting, Sirius confessed, worrying his bottom lip. I wanted to be him so fucking badly. With a harsh swallow, he risked a glance over at James. I can't see anyone else but him. What's the plan then? Lily looked away momentarily to waggle her fingers at Marlene. I let Remus come to me, Sirius said, taking a deep breath and nodding assuredly. I wait for him to tell me when he's ready. Desperately, he looked up at Mooney just as he threw his head back to hit a rather high note in the harmony he was singing with Marlene, his voice moving into a sharp growl. And then, if it turns out you're wrong, nobody will ever know but us, James said excitedly, trying his best to be reassuring, but the only thing that could make Sirius feel totally at ease again would be to see Remus's face underneath that mask. Until then, this was going to slowly eat away at him. For the rest of the set, Sirius studied Mooney. The movement of his fingers, the quality of his vocal tone, his posture, his gait, his mannerisms. If this was Remus, Sirius couldn't decide which one was the true Remus. This arrogant, excitable, audacious bassist on stage, or the quietly vulgar, loudly compassionate, mischievously endearing priest he was in church. Maybe he was some fiendish mixture of both of them, but it was hard for Sirius to reconcile the unfettered way Mooney moved on the stage to the relative austerity of Remus in his clerical collar. Still, the way Mooney was currently arching his back, base held out perpendicular to his body, head craned back so that the tattoo across his elegantly long neck was on full display. It reminded Sirius a bit of that first morning after, when Remus had quite deliberately rolled his explicitly stiffened hips into Sirius's own. Some of Mooney's arrogance had been present in that decision. Maybe they weren't so different. Maybe Sirius hadn't seen all of Remus yet. In fact, he knew he hadn't, and that was part of what made this idea so thrilling. The notion that Remus could do the things that Mooney did, that Remus could carry that bass line with his fingers, that Remus had spent hundreds of hours under the needle of a tattoo gun, that Remus could recklessly arch his back that way just because he knew what it would do to Sirius. That Remus was the one who had just stolen a tawdry kiss from Sirius's throat in front of a crowd of strangers. That idea left Sirius buzzing with anticipation. Because if Remus could do all those things, Sirius couldn't begin to imagine all the things Remus could do beyond that. And he wanted to discover all of them. He wanted to know everything. In time, he would, if Remus would let him. But he was going to leave that decision entirely up to Remus. Still, he couldn't imagine Remus having the fortitude to keep this secret much longer. Not when Mooney's amorous theatrics grew bolder with every show. In fact, as he thought about it, he was almost certain he could get the truth out of Mooney that very evening. But he wouldn't. Instead, he would do the same thing that Mooney had done to him the last few shows. Leave him wanting. Leave him wondering. As Hollyhead began clearing the stage, Sirius pulled James and Lily from the crowd. There was quite a bit of grumbling, but they followed nonetheless. As they approached the exit, Sirius was surprised to find Pete standing there, tattooed arms crossed, looking absolutely elated to see Sirius. "We meet again, Sirius," he said with that trademark grin, reaching out his hand. But when Sirius took it, Pete surprised him by pulling him into a hug. With his unshaven face close to Sirius's ear, he said in a loud voice to be heard over the pub's filler music between acts, "It's obvious, isn't it?" But before Sirius could pull away to look at Pete with the surprise on his face, Pete added, "How much he adores you." "Tell Mooney to text me," Sirius said, putting quite a bit of emphasis on the name he used, patting Pete on the back before leaning away to give him a conspiratorial wink. Pete just smiled and nodded. Sirius took the back seat of James and Lily's car on the rest of the ride home, knowing that, if his plan went correctly, he wouldn't be very good company, because he would be too busy texting. Sooner than he thought, the text came through. As he unlocked his phone, he wondered, Remus or Mooney? "Mooney, I was surprised to see you tonight. I didn't think you'd come to my shows anymore." Padfoot, "I know, I'm sorry. Actually, I was a little surprised too. Didn't think you'd serenade me like that. Mooney. I'd like your honest feedback. I've never jumped off stage for anyone before. Padfoot. Here's my unedited review of your performance. Fuck. Mooney. Is that a fuck you or a fuck me? Padfoot. You know damn well it's both, since I moaned them into your ear. Mooney. Oh, I enjoyed that thoroughly, by the way. Padfoot. I thought you might. Mooney. As much as I'd like to jump right back into it, I really have to know. Why did you come back? I thought you wanted something else. Or someone else. If this text wasn't from Remus, Sirius would call out to God himself to strike him down. Because Remus, and only Remus, knew that Sirius had stopped texting Mooney because it turned out he wasn't who he thought he was. Or was he? Well, besides, James, but James was on Sirius's team in this game. Padfoot. There is no one else. It's been you since the beginning. It was always you. I just didn't always know it. Everything Sirius wrote was slated with intention. There were two ways this dialogue could be interpreted. That it had always been Remus, because Remus was always Mooney. Sirius just didn't know it at first. Alternatively, depending on how much Remus thought Sirius knew, it could also be interpreted as Sirius coming to realize that Mooney had been the one he wanted all along, as if he hadn't realized that Mooney and Remus were the same person. And Sirius was wickedly aware of both translations. On one hand, it could give Remus a clue that Sirius knew the truth. On the other, more diabolical hand, it could make Remus jealous of himself, and that might prompt Remus into telling him the truth anyway. Sure, he wanted to hear the truth from Remus, but that didn't mean he didn't want it to happen as quickly as it fucking could. Because, despite that he was enormously proud of himself for figuring it all out on his own, he wanted to hear it from Remus's lips. He wanted to see the tattooed skin that he knew was underneath the clerical collar. He wanted Remus to trust him with this, specifically, like he trusted him with everything else. The way he trusted Sirius enough to break into Walburga's house together. The way he trusted Sirius enough to leave him alone in his flat and sleep in his bed. The way he trusted Sirius enough to watch after Harry and Teddy. The way he trusted Sirius enough to leave a mark on his neck. Mooney. What about the priest? This conversation was going precisely as Sirius predicted it would. It had to be Remus. It had to be. Because only Remus would ask that question. Mooney wouldn't know things with the priest had even gotten that serious. As far as he knew, the priest had turned down every single one of Sirius's advances. Padfoot. I meant it when I said I might fall in love with this priest, but while I'm at it, I might also fall in love with you. Too early to tell just yet. It was the perfect response, really. It was true. He was probably well on his way to falling in love with Remus, if he wasn't already. And if Remus was Mooney, then, hell, he was already falling in love with both of them. There was a minuscule chance that they were different people, and if they were, Sirius was going to have an entirely different set of problems on his hands, but he ignored that possibility for now. Mooney. Well, shit. I think I fell in love tonight when you whispered fuck me into my ear. Padfoot. I'm certain I've said that to you before. Or are you the one who said it to me? Mooney. I texted it to you. Totally different. Much hotter in person. Shame I had to finish the set. I could have kissed you all night. Padfoot. I wish you would have, but I also wish I could kiss you, without the mask. Mooney. Hell, I get reckless when you're around. Who knows? Maybe next show? I'll play totally stark naked. Padfoot. Yeah, so I just said fuck me out loud to myself, in the back of my best mate's car, with his wife in the passenger seat. You are making my life so awkward. Mooney. I'm not kidding when I say you should record a voice memo of you saying the words fuck me and send it to me. For science. Padfoot. Hang the fuck on. I'd like to circle back to you playing a show naked. I got so embarrassed by the fuck me situation that I didn't get to fantasize appropriately. Mooney. How much fuel do you want to add to this fire? Padfoot. Oh God, I'm still in the car. It's like an hour drive. Please don't torture me like this. Mooney. I was only going to say that if I have very recently actually played bass naked. Padfoot. I'm going to fucking scream. If you say it was at a show that other people got to see and I did not. Mooney. It was not at a show. It was in my bedroom. That I'm not that confident. Padfoot. Your performance tonight said otherwise. Mooney. Oh, I like that response. Thank you. What was your favorite part? Padfoot. Oh, you're about to kink shame me for this. I just know it. The way you breathe when you sing. Mooney. Fuck. Okay. Not what I was expecting. But I'm not mad about it. Explain it to me. Padfoot. You smoke, don't you? Mooney. I do. Can you tell? By my singing? Padfoot. Oh, fuck yes. It makes your breathing shorter. Then when you go up for a higher note, you get this cute little whine in your voice, and you dramatically gasp for air, like you're choking. Mooney. Oh my God, you're such a sadist. Padfoot. I knew you would give me shit for this. Mooney. You really find that attractive? Padfoot. You have no fucking idea. It happened twice in that Newfound Glory song, and I wanted to fucking die both times, in the Shakespearean sense. Mooney. Jesus Christ. So all I have to do is breathe to get you hot. Is that what you're saying? Padfoot. All you have to do is fucking exist. But since breathing is a part of existing, it's a win-win for me. Mooney. The downside is, now I can never quit smoking. The upside is, I'm going to consciously add that into every song we play from now on. You're welcome. Padfoot. You're plotting my murder. I hope you're aware of that. That makes it premeditated. Mooney. God, I miss this banter. I'm so glad you showed up tonight. Padfoot. Don't get all sentimental on me, Mooney. I'm very prone to tears. Mooney. You're the one who said he was in love with me. Padfoot. I said it was a possibility. Don't start getting cocky. A terrible idea sparked into Sirius's mind. With his phone still in hand, he closed the conversation with Mooney for the time being and opened another text conversation with the same person. How's Granddad? Before any response from Remus could come through, another message from Mooney came in. A soft laugh moved through Sirius's throat as he imagined Remus trying to juggle two conversations, likely on two separate phones, since he didn't have the same mobile number as Mooney. Mooney. You could have used any other word, you know, but you still chose the one with cock in it. Padfoot. Do you not know me by now? I am nothing without an euphemism. Mooney. I know this, and I love it about you. Padfoot. Careful, Moons. You might admit something incriminating. Mooney. First of all, please call me Moons again. God, you were so fucking cute. Second of all, you already know the truth. Padfoot. What truth is that? I'd like to see you admit it. In the same moment that Sirius sent his response to Mooney, one came in from Remus, and Sirius realized how dangerous this could potentially be, carrying on conversations with both of them. Even though both were actually the same person, he could easily mix them up and send the wrong text. Then again, wouldn't that open some doors for Remus to finally admit the truth? Only if Sirius's assumptions about Mooney was correct. And if it wasn't, God, he was about to make an utter fool of himself. Your Holiness, I managed to sneak away for a bit. I told him I was going to pray with a parishioner. Went to a pub instead. Sirius. In your clerical collar? Your Holiness. Oh, I am about to ruin your day. I am not in the collar. My throat is totally bare. Sirius. Oh my God, Remus. How dare you? Honestly? Showing off your gorgeous throat? To strangers? And not to me? Curiously, but not surprisingly, Sirius noticed that while he was getting responses from Remus, he wasn't getting responses from Mooney. If that wasn't a sign, he didn't know what was. There was a slight pause in the conversation from Remus, and during that time, Mooney finally replied. Mooney, the truth is, I like you, Padfoot. I like you quite a bit. Too much, maybe. In the very next moment, a reply came from Remus, and Sirius began to feel dizzy trying to keep up with the conversations. 2 different conversations with the same person. And the conversations weren't even that different, because Remus, try as he might, couldn't hide his wit or his passion or his feelings for Sirius. His voice, under either name, came across the same. He was still Remus. Your Holiness, you don't know my throat is gorgeous. You've only ever seen the top half. Sirius, I don't have to see it to know. The top half is proof enough. Not to mention that time I put my lips on it. We should do that again. Your Holiness. Oh, we should definitely do that again. Maybe next time, without the collar. Sirius. Jesus Christ, Remus. This is ridiculous. I am so turned on right now. Just the thought of you, tearing off that damn collar. Good fucking God. Your Holiness. Well, just so you know, the collar is built into the shirt, which means to take off the collar, I would have to take off more than the collar. He got so distracted by the notion of Remus taking off the collar, taking off more than the collar, seeing that much of Remus's skin for the first time, hopefully with massive amounts of tattoos, that he forgot to reply to Mooney. God, this was getting to be too much. He couldn't keep this up for much longer. Padfoot. No such thing as too much, mostly because I also like you far too much. Listen, while we're on the subject, you like me, I like you. I can keep a few secrets. I'm keeping a few right now. What's one more? Mooney. Funny you say that, because I swear to God, I looked for you after the show, so I could take you behind the pub and kiss you senseless. Or suck your cock. Hadn't decided which. Probably both. Either way, the mask would have had to come off. Padfoot. Are you I'm going to... You were... Fuck. There isn't a curse word strong enough for the situation. Mooney. I probably shouldn't have told you, but I wanted you to suffer a little. Padfoot. You were being wildly unfair. You did the same thing to me the last 2 shows. You left without saying anything. Where were you when I wanted to kiss you and or suck your cock? Mooney. I'll make a deal with you. We've got 1 show left. Friday night. Come find me after. We'll see what happens. The next Hollyhead show was Friday night? That was the day of Orion's funeral, the day Remus was supposed to deliver the eulogy. Of course, the funeral was Friday afternoon. There would be plenty of time for him to carry out the funeral and still make it to the show, right? Or did this mean Sirius was wrong? Just in case, he switched back over to the conversation with Remus, not wanting to keep him waiting if he wasn't Mooney, especially now that he was talking about taking off more than just his collar. Sirius, are you propositioning me? Because I accept. Your Holiness. Honestly, yes. That's exactly what I'm doing. I don't give a shit about the church. I don't care if we get caught. I'm going to lose my fucking mind if I don't at least get to kiss you. And I mean properly kiss you. Not on your nose, not on your neck, though I enjoyed that fully. I mean, press you to the wall, my hips between your legs, my tongue in your mouth, kiss you with intent. Sirius. Remus, God, intent to do what? Please tell me. I want you to be specific. Your Holiness, to make you say my name, the way you did last night, to undress you slowly, to stay up until dawn, tasting every bit of your skin, to let you see every bit of mine. Sirius, fuck me. When is your granddad leaving again? Your Holiness, not soon enough. With a shallow breath blown out through pursed lips, Sirius sank down into his seat, letting his head fall back against the headrest. 2 days. In 2 days' time, he would know the truth. because Mooney was going to take off his mask, and Remus was going to take off everything. Friday couldn't come soon enough. Just as he and Remus had joked in the beginning, Sirius was going to celebrate the death of his arsehole father in a way that perfectly defiled Orion's memory by fornicating with his priest.